All right. How's everybody? All right, so we can go for it this time. Let's hope it works out. I usually do this testing business that you never get to see. When I say testing, testing, and then start over, and man, it's obnoxious. All right, here we go. So welcome back. This week's set of reading questions marks the beginning of a new topic. We have transitioned from discussing the utilitarian approach to right and wrong to a discussion of John Rawls' theory of justice. Rawls' theory is a type of social contract theory. In what follows, I will introduce the social contract tradition of thought by describing the first highly influential version of social contract theory that was developed by Thomas Hobbes in the mid-17th century. We will then look at some weaknesses of Hobbes' view in order to understand the improvements that Rawls is trying to make. In order to understand Hobbes' version of social contract theory, it is best to start out by picturing a time and location where people gathered in small clans and hadn't yet developed a formal system of rules and customs that served to guide their interactions with one another. Imagine a scenario in which the basic social unit was a small group of families, or even one very large extended family, living off of whatever resources they could get from nature by hunting and gathering. Hobbes referred to such a pre-societal, or perhaps very minimally societal, mode of living as the state of nature. Hobbes famously described life in the state of nature as nasty, brutish, and short. This is because, without a robust set of legal and cultural norms to guide persons' interactions, conflict, even violent conflict, would have been the norm, as there would have been insufficient planning and cooperation to ward off whatever challenges to survival nature or competing clans presented. Now, picture two clans arriving at the same river, where fruits and nuts grew and animals came to drink. Having access to such a river would be of great benefit. Having sole control over the area would produce an abundance of resources for the group in charge. Hence, each clan would face a choice. They could either choose option 1, go to war to control the area. The winner gets the abundance of resources and the loser gets nothing. Furthermore, many of each clan are likely to perish, whether they win or lose. Or they could choose option 2. The clans could negotiate and figure out a way to share the territory. Neither would get an overabundance of resources, but neither would risk death and starvation either. Notice that it is in the best interests of both clans to choose option 2, to compromise. So Hobbes posited that societal rules and regulations were originally established because it was in the self-interest of everyone involved to do so. The basic idea behind Hobbes' version of social contract theory is that morality simply is whatever laws and institutions are negotiated by the persons governed by those rules. These laws and institutions are referred to as a social contract. Morality does not exist outside of these negotiated social agreements. Furthermore, each person or smaller group that enters into the contract is primarily concerned with their own benefits. So they're self-interested. Hobbes thinks this is a realistic view of human nature and motivations. However, since other people have a say in what rules and customs are to be adopted, a series of compromises take place that cause the principles that are adopted to take competing interests into account. Many social contract theorists believe that this is what actually happens historically. So, just to reiterate that last point made, social contract theory is both, descriptive. The claim is that this is how legal, moral, social institutions arise. And then there's this more theoretical claim that that's all that morality really amounts to. So those in the social contract tradition that stick close to the thinking of Hobbes in particular, they both accept the description and that claim of cultural relativism, that morality is just whatever is thought to be or accepted as the rules by which people use to govern their interactions with one another. Now, with that in mind, the biggest problem with this approach to defining morality and justice in terms of whatever social contract happens to be negotiated by the people living under that social contract is that whenever one group is stronger than another, they have a lot more leverage in regards to determining which principles of order and regulation or laws a society adopts. Hence, it is quite common for social contracts to be negotiated or imposed without any real negotiating, which are hopelessly unfair to the members of society who have less power. Unjust social orders which favor the powerful have arisen in every corner of our planet. In our nation's own history, Native Americans have been repeatedly forced to accept treaties and laws which have involved such injustices as forced relocation, slavery, unlawful imprisonment, and the destruction of ancient patterns of life. Now, if a Hobbesian version of social contract theory was the correct moral theory, whatever laws get passed in a society define what morality is. Hence, there can't be any immoral laws on such a view. The problem is that this is obviously not the case. Hence, any theory of justice or morally right action in the social contract tradition has to be able to distinguish between just and unjust social contracts. Rawls develops a version of social contract theory which he thinks would only lead to the development of a truly just social order, which he understands as one that is fair to all of its members. Okay, now that we have looked at an important forerunner of Rawls' theory, Thomas Hobbes, and have covered both the basic principles of social contract theory and an important objection to Hobbes' version, we have sufficient context to begin exploring Rawls' views. Question 1a asks what Rawls thinks the principles of justice are. I will first state Rawls' answer to this question, and I will then unpack that answer. Hobbes was content to describe a historical process by which actual social contracts have arisen. Rawls is doing something else. Rawls wants us to imagine a situation in which a set of truly just and fair laws would be negotiated. His focus on seeing moral laws as negotiated agreements is what makes him a member of the social contract tradition. He is an innovator in this tradition because he suggests some ideal as opposed to actual conditions under which just laws would be negotiated. Rawls states that a just set of principles are the principles that a group of people that have the following traits would come up with. The people that are negotiating the principles would have to be free and rational, concerned to further their own interests, and exist in an initial position of equality. Rawls refers to this hypothetical group of people negotiating together under these conditions as the original position. Let us review each point. First of all, the persons participating in the negotiation have to be free. This means none of the negotiators have any kind of leverage or control over any of the other negotiators. The negotiators also need to be rational. Rationality is a rather vague term, hence we must define it whenever we use it for that occasion of use. The negotiators in the original position are rational in the sense that they all have an equally competent understanding of the likely consequences of a variety of policy proposals. Nobody in the group is smarter in this sense than any other member. Condition B, that each negotiator is concerned to further his or her own interests, is interesting. Why should the group of people that are setting out just and fair laws for everyone be primarily concerned to further their own interests? The reasons Rawls gives for this, or one reason I should say that Rawls gives for this, is that he wants the negotiators to have a set of motivations which match the motivations that people in the real world actually have. The challenge that all ethical theories face, in one form or another, is to how to get rules that are fair to everyone from a group of people who are fundamentally self-interested. Rawls' own solution to this problem will become clearer when we discuss his notion of the veil of ignorance. But we will proceed through the questions and arrive there in due time. So before I move the slide forward again, so far what do we know about the negotiators? They're free, so they don't really control one another. They're rational, so they all can understand the likely consequences of a variety of policy proposals. And they're all negotiating in their own self-interests. But as we'll see, Rawls has a way of achieving impartiality, even though everybody's rather self-interested. That's what's exciting about his view, so I know you're excited. Okay, now, question 1b inquires, what term is justice roughly synonymous with? The answer is fairness. A just society is one in which the basic laws and institutions take everyone's interests into account in order to make sure that everyone has an equal chance at achieving various types of success. In another part of a theory of justice, Rawls distinguishes between distributive justice and retributive justice. Retributive justice pertains to the criminal justice system. Criminal justice, or just punishment, has to do with purported criminals receiving their due process and also making sure the punishments fit the severity of the crimes committed. This is not Rawls' main focus. He is mostly concerned with distributive justice. Distributive justice pertains to the fair distribution of a variety of basic rights and resources. Rawls thinks that people who are negotiating in the original position, which we have just covered, that was the free and rational, self-interested business, would fairly distribute basic rights and resources. Now, remember, Rawls' project is to help us understand what principles that guide action on a societal level are truly just by having us imagine what a group of people in a specific set of circumstances would agree on. He labels the relevant set of circumstances the original position. On an earlier slide, we mapped out what it means for the negotiators to be free and rational. Now we have come to the most interesting dimension of Rawls' description of this original position. The negotiators must be imagined as negotiating the basic rules their society will run on behind a veil of ignorance. Question 2a asked you to describe this state, or what it means to be behind the veil. This is how Rawls describes the veil of ignorance. Among the essential features of this situation is that no one knows his place in society, his class position or social status, nor does anyone know his fortune in the distribution of natural assets and abilities, his intelligence, strength, and the like. So all these features of the self are things one does not know. I noted on the last slide that persons in the original position should be thought of as defending their own interests. However, persons behind the veil do not really know what their own specific interests are. Hence, it becomes reasonable for them to accept a society that is set up in such a manner that everyone is treated well and has an equal chance at various kinds of success. Rawls goes on to elaborate upon what persons behind the veil do not know about themselves. One would not know one's own gender, age, race, or anything which could bias one in favor of a particular societal group. This is the answer to question 2b, which concerns the purpose of the veil of ignorance. When a person makes a choice behind a veil of ignorance, it is irrational for them to be biased against any particular group because, for all they know, they are a part of that group. For example, you wouldn't advocate a sexist culture if you do not know if you are a man or a woman. You would not advocate a racist culture if you do not know what race you belong to. And here's like a more mundane illustration. Imagine that you and another person are in a dark room and you both have hats on your head. One of your hats is red and the other's green. You and the other person get to decide how to split the food in the room when the lights are turned on. It would be irrational for either of you to suggest that the person with the red hat gets all or most of the food because neither of you have any idea who is in fact wearing the red hat. Hence, you would decide that the wearer of the green hat gets just as much food as the person with the red hat. Because, you might be wearing the green hat, for all you know. Ignorance here would serve to eliminate bias. And that's the general purpose of the veil of ignorance. So if I don't know which societal groups I belong to, I'm not really going to restrict that group unless it's more dangerous not to than it is to restrict them. So I'd still, send murderers to jail because, sure, if I'm a murderer, it'd be nice not to go to jail. But if I'm not, I could get killed if I'm not locking these people up. So it would still be a good idea to, restrict the actions of the murderer But notice, you need a really good reason to restrict that liberty. Now, question 2C asks you why Rawls describes the type of injustice that he is discussing as justice as fairness. The answer is that the original position in which members decide on the principles that they are to use behind a veil of ignorance is a fair starting point. It is fair because in that position it is irrational to be biased towards or against any group, again without an outstanding reason. You can think of decision-making behind the veil of ignorance as an aid to your imagination when you try and think of what an unbiased social policy would look like. As an aid to the imagination, it does not need to be actually possible. So this is important to realize. A common first response to this is, well, what use is this? No one can actually reason behind the veil. Well, as long as we can imagine how the reasoning would go, Rawls has given us a nice tool for thinking about justice. And again, what these conditions do is they promote impartiality. So if I don't know what groups I belong to, I'm going to think about what it would be like to be a member of all the groups in regards to the consequences of a specific social policy, and then I'll ascertain the wisdom of accepting the policy or banning it for all the different members of all the different groups. And I'm going to be really concerned about the bad consequences a policy could have on any subgroup, because for all I know, I might be a member of that subgroup. Okay, now, oh yes, I botched something on your question sheet. There's a 2D listed. That was an error, so there shouldn't have been a D there. But I'm sure you figured that out. You're smart. You're smart people. All right, so let us address 2E. In the last paragraph of page 73, Rawls argues that people in the original position would follow two principles when they choose the rules and laws for their society. First, they would assign everyone equal basic human rights and duties. A little bit later, Rawls gives the following more thorough definition of this first principle. Rawls thinks that persons in the original position would agree that, and here I just labeled it Principle 1, each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive basic liberty compatible with a similar liberty for others. So here are some examples of basic liberties. Everyone would have a right to vote, run for office, exhibit free speech, assemble freely. You can add a bunch. Additional basic liberties are liberty of conscience, freedom of thought, personal property rights, and freedom from arbitrary arrest and seizures. So just think of our basic Bill of Rights. Principle 1 seems right. And all I mean by that here, well, I mean two things. One, it seems like, yes, this is the principle we want. But more specifically for Rawls' theory, this is a principle that would be ratified behind the veil of ignorance. So for example, no one would vote for slavery, right, if you're behind the veil, because you would not know whether or not you would end up being the slave yourself. You would not restrict the right to vote to men and exclude women, because for all you know, you are one of the women in the society who would be excluded from voting. He also argues that persons behind the veil would ratify the following principle. This is Principle 2. Social and economic inequalities, for example, inequalities of wealth and authority are just only if they result in compensating benefits for everyone, and in particular, the least advantaged members of society. The rationale for Principle 2 is less obvious than the rationale for Principle 1. Consider how wealth might be distributed. Premise 2 states that reasoners behind the veil will only allow some people to gain significantly more wealth than others if that is good for everyone, and especially the least well-off in society. The idea here is that since we do not know which position in society we hold, we will want everyone to have, you can either phrase it as roughly equal wealth, or you could phrase it as you'd want the minimum standard of wealth that each person has to be a really good, decent minimum to ensure a decent quality of life come what may. However, we would also know behind the veil some basic economics. So we would know that one person being wealthy is not necessarily, or even usually perhaps, what makes another person poor in a variety of situations. Indeed, there are clear cases which illustrate that allowing some to get rich, say by having low taxes and that sort of thing, improves the economic status of others as well. If someone is talented with money and uses the money to start a business that employs others, but wouldn't have bothered if they were not allowed to make a substantial profit, then it is in everyone's interest for that person to be able to make more profit than the average person. Hence, Rawls' view of justice does not entail outright socialism, but it does force one to justify inequalities regarding wealth on the grounds that such an inequality has a public benefit. Okay, the next 2 weeks is a little odd. At this point, you want to proceed to the discussion board. I set them up a little differently this week. They're far more geared toward learning than demonstrating that you have learned. That's because this material is a little harder than the utilitarian stuff. Next week, the only assignment you're going to get is to complete your first draft of your essay, and you'll probably be putting a lot more work on your first draft than your second. I'll give you a lot of feedback on that first draft, then you'll have the opportunity to improve it for the second. But if you're working really hard on the first one and have a decent grasp on the material, I would like to see a pretty good first draft. And it's okay, like if you mess some stuff up, misinterpret some ideas, that's why it's a 2-draft assignment. I love giving the feedback, and then I also like to see the improvements on the second draft. And you should have something, if you follow the process, that you're pretty proud of. But that essay is more on the utilitarian stuff. So, we're introducing Rawls here. We're going to let it marinate for a week. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll come back to it. And I'll ask a bunch of questions that aren't actually based on more reading, because this is pretty vocabulary heavy already. But it'll give you an opportunity to apply Rawlsian reasoning to a bunch of cases. And that way, by the time we get to the midterm, you'll be very familiar with how a Rawlsian would go about addressing social justice issues. All right. Hope you enjoyed it.